I was a broke 21-year-old college student. To avoid the crowds, I only did my laundry at 2 in the morning. But after what happened on a rainy Tuesday night, I will never step foot inside a public laundromat again. It was pouring rain, and the 24-hour coin laundry sat about 3 blocks from my apartment. The place was old and run down, mostly composed of a massive glass storefront shining like a beacon in the pitch-black night. Inside, you are completely isolated. You're surrounded by the heavy, rhythmic thudding of industrial washing machines. That constant hum is deafening enough to mask the sound of footsteps creeping up behind you. But the real danger is the architecture. At night, the blazing fluorescent lights create a severe glare on that massive glass storefront. Instead of seeing out into the dark street, the light reflects right back at you, turning the windows into giant mirrors. While your own reflection blinds you to the outside world, that same lighting disparity creates a total visibility gap. Anyone standing out in the dark can see every single move you make with perfect clarity. Then, cutting straight through the comforting drone of the tumbling dryers, came a sound, a sharp metallic tap against the front glass. This architectural layout creates a sensory imbalance. You are effectively confined to a space where your every movement is broadcast to the street, while the world beyond the glass remains a complete black void. I cupped my hands around my face and pressed up against the cold window to block the glare. Standing outside in the pouring rain, barely a foot away, was a man. He wore no coat, just a soaking wet t-shirt. He had a coin in his hand, rhythmically tapping it against the glass. He didn't say a word or react to the freezing rain. He just stood there, maintaining a completely dead, unblinking stare locked directly on my face. When I took a step back, he moved. He began pacing back and forth across the length of the glass storefront, stopping and turning to perfectly match my movements inside. I reached into my pocket, but my phone was dead. I had forgotten to charge it before leaving the apartment. I was completely alone in an empty industrial district with absolutely no way to call for help. I left my clothes in the washers, grabbed my empty bags, and made a break for the exit. But as soon as I took a step, the man outside matched my pace. He positioned himself directly in front of the exterior door, physically blocking my only way out, and stretched his face into a wide, unnatural smile. A 1/4 inch of cheap commercial glass was the only physical barrier left between me and a completely unpredictable threat. My physical exposure was total. At first, your brain tries to protect you by explaining the threat away. I sat back down in the hard plastic chairs and tried to convince myself he was just an eccentric drifter, seeking shelter or spare change. The logic is simple. If you don't engage, they lose interest. I pretended to read my textbook, waiting for him to get bored and wander back into the night. But he didn't leave. He stopped pacing, stood squarely in front of the door, and slowly, deliberately, reached deep into his wet pocket. He retrieved 2 items from the soaking wet fabric, a thick industrial metal chain and a heavy padlock. A weapon would have been easier to process, but there is no simple way to rationalize a man carrying a heavy chain toward a public exit at 3 in the morning. He looped the heavy metal chain through the exterior door handles, pulling them tight, before clicking the padlock shut. He was intentionally locking me inside. I sprinted to the back of the laundromat, threw open the door to a tiny, windowless employee supply closet, and then locked the deadbolt behind me. I sat shivering on that filthy floor in total darkness for hours. Every few minutes, I heard the muffled sound of him violently rattling the chained front doors to make sure his trap was holding. Finally, the sweeping red and blue lights of a passing police cruiser flashed across the front windows. The heavy rattling stopped, and the man scrambled off into the alleyway. The police had to smash the glass of the chain doors just to get me out. By the time I crawled out of the back closet, the man had completely vanished. He left the chain and a sterile padlock behind, wiped entirely clean of fingerprints. They never caught him, and that unresolved ending leaves a lasting psychological scar. The attacker never actually wanted to break in. He only wanted to make sure I couldn't get out. Once you experience that kind of entrapment, it permanently poisons your ability to feel safe in the most ordinary public spaces.